Hello, fellow Star Trek fans. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Clonestar Podcast. I am joined by my wonderful friend, Joseph Hurley. Show, how are you doing this week?
Not too bad, Mike. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. This week, we've got a really special guest. We're continuing on our 30 Years of Voyager celebration interviews. And this week, we are delighted to welcome a man who has the record for the most episodes of directing in Star Trek with an impressive 62. 2 for TNG, 17 for DS9, a whopping 28 for Voyager, and 15 for Enterprise. He even has a famous fish in Picard's ready room named after him. We are delighted to welcome back to the show David Livingston. David, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me.
David, with such an impressive Star Trek CV, the obvious question is, did you watch Star Trek when it was on the original run or the movies or things like that? Or did you just happen to join the next generation and go, listen, lads, I have no idea what the hell the Star Trek thing is about, but I'm here to work, no problem.
As a teen in the 60s, I did not watch the show. I watched, my favorite show at the time was Man from U.N.C.L.E. But I did know about the guy with the pointy ears. And then when the first feature came out, the Robert Wise Star Trek, I was very impressed with it. I thought it was a terrific movie. And subsequently, I saw the other Star Trek features, the one with the whale where they come back to present day and the great comedy and all that. And I had an affinity for those characters. I thought it was very rich and the whole aura of the show. But to get involved in the show was simply another job for me. I was um, the head of production at Paramount was looking for a production manager for the pilot of The Next Generation. And my boss at the time, I was working over at ABC Circle Films doing pilots and TV movies. She suggested me to Mike Schoenbrunn, who was the head of physical production that time at Paramount. And I went over and interviewed for it, and that was it. But it wasn't because I was a fan or anything. It was simply another job.
And David, just look at some of the, like you were a unit production manager, you were a supervising producer. What was involved in those two roles?
A unit production manager is below the line. Below the line people are the ones who do all the work. The above the line people are the ones who get paid all the money. They're the producers, the writers, the directors, and the actors. The unit production manager is responsible for mounting the physical production, hiring the crew, doing the budgets, and then supervising to make sure that you hopefully finish you get the director to finish on schedule and that you come close to adhering to the budgets.
So,
Um,
David, are you saying to me that whenever I read about Star Trek episodes that were going over budget or had to come in under budget, that was you with a clipboard saying, guys, that's it. You're not getting any reshoots. This has to be finished today. And that's the end of that.
yeah, I try that, but usually I'd fail. Directors, I've always said, have the conscience of a rattlesnake. And also the producers are always looking to squeeze out everything they can. Um, my only kudo to myself as a unit production manager was that I sided with the producers more than the studio. I cut my teeth at Universal, which was considered the factory for television production,
Yeah.
and this was in the early 80s. Um, and I was always brought into the production office by the head production manager and reprimanded for being supportive of the producers by uh, giving them as much as I could. But I felt that was my job. If we were given the money, we should have the right to spend it all.
Hmm.
So when I got onto Star Trek and had that same ethic about working as a production manager. Rick Berman and Bob Justman, the supervising producers at the time, saw that how I was committed to the best interests of the show and not to the budget or to the studio. And when I was going to leave the show at Christmas, the first season, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They offered me a producer job, which was above the line, which meant less work, more money and a better title. So it was a no-brainer.
That's always a win, isn't it? When it's more money and less work.
David, there's always been so many stories about the Next Generation's first season about like how kind of chaotic it was behind the scenes and like would it even last, and like Patrick Stewart talking about living out of a suitcase. Did you feel that at the time? Because obviously, as you said, like coming out to the Next Gen was like just it was another job for you and things like that. Did you see the potential in what this show could be, or did you just say, guys, this could be gone within a year and that's it, and well, it's fine, I'll get my experience?
To me, there was no question the show would go on and probably go on for 7 years. Paramount knew they had the goose that laid the golden egg, and they weren't going to let it. They weren't going to let it get away. But every series has first-year issues, and the Next Generation certainly did. It was most reflective on my job in that the scripts would have arrived late, so that costs would increase because we'd have to spend money to catch up. If a set that normally costs $10,000 to build, if we had 2 weeks to build it, when you only had 1 week to build, then it was $20,000. And those were the kinds of issues I had to deal with. And to the chagrin of the actors and to the production staff, it was always problematic to have the scripts come so late. The actors had to memorize their lines a lot at the last minute. And also the script revisions would come in late. And they would have to learn whole new scenes or revise scenes the night before. So it was problematic, but no different than most episodic television shows that are trying to find their grounding and their feet during that first season.
And in terms of then, what does the supervising producer then do that you moved on to next?
Supervises, make sure that everybody else is doing the work. And that's literally true. The great thing about Star Trek is we hired really, really good people so that we could sit back and watch. So I didn't have a lot to do. My main job as a supervising producer was during the production meetings to talk about the script and what we could and could not afford. And also during the budgeting process to go over with the different department heads to make sure that they submitted budgets that I would then analyze and make sure that we could that they fit into the pattern, or that if we wanted to break the pattern, that this was an opportunity to do it because of the script's demands. So it was a matter of trying to figure out what we could afford for that particular episode.
And just say, with say like William Shatner's documentary of Chaos on the Bridge for the first 3 seasons, do you think the kind of the turmoil behind the scenes is slightly over exaggerated in the interest of kind of like being a bit kind of sensationalist to kind of get attention, or was it as bad as made out?
We're in show business, so everything is exaggerated, and it also depends on your point of view. It was fraught. It was not the easiest time, and we went over budget, which was inevitable. And we actually had to do a clip show at the end of the season where you literally get clips from previous episodes and build a show around them. And it was basically, I think, Jonathan Frakes in sick bay or something that we shot for a day or so, and then filled it in with all these clips from other episodes so that we could make up the budget shortfalls. And then the following season, when I was preparing the pattern budget, I addressed all these shortcomings that we had in the initial budget so that the second season we weren't as restricted in terms of the budget, which was, again, compliments to Paramount. Every year that I prepared a pattern budget, they always gave us more money. Every year things cost more, and they recognized that, and they never held back. Because again, they knew what they had. It wasn't as if they were being generous, or they knew what it took to do this television show. Remember, we had to create everything out of whole cloth. Yeah. When you went on, you couldn't go to a house in the valley and shoot in somebody's living room, unless you were doing a show going back in time. We had to create everything out of whole cloth, costumes, wardrobe. The makeups all had to be designed for goofy aliens. Everything didn't exist in the 20th century. So that cost money. And
I was just thinking
they
back
gave
to
it.
the. I was just thinking back at the episode of Shades of Grey, the Next Generation episode with all the clips and all that. It just reminded me of Family Ties, which was always so responsible for so many clip shows. Every season there was always a clip show on Family Ties. In terms of, say, Dave, what was your working relationship with the likes of Rick Berman and Bob Justman? Was it good? Was it positive, say, or how was it?
They were terrific, and they were really supportive of me, and they let me do my job. They were really busy having to deal with the script situation and channeling Gene and all those things that went on in the Hart Building, which was the writers' building. Um, Bob had a less of a role than Rick did. Bob was more my boss at that point than Rick was, and Bob really gave me free rein. Um, and Bob left the show eventually. He was more brought on to make the transition because Gene needed somebody that he could trust to help mount the show. And once that happened, he withdrew and left the show. After that, Rick and I developed a really close relationship, and he trusted me, which was terrific. Uh, I am so grateful to Rick for the jobs he gave me, and both as a producer and as a director. And we were very close working partners. I was doing the production side, and he was doing all the creative stuff. So it was terrific. I had an office next to him initially in the trailers where the production trailer where we were initially. And then when we moved over to the Cooper building, my office was next to his for years.
And David, at what point did you kind of like? Obviously, we know like once the Next Gen got over its first few rocky years, it turned into an absolute juggernaut of a TV show that couldn't be stopped, no matter what it was. At what point did everyone kind of start to feel, wait a second, we're creating something that like is kind of stepped out of the shadow of the original series and is completely forging its own identity and is basically now its own thing?
To me, it was from day one because my life was those characters and those actors. That's more of a question for you guys to figure out and say, yeah, this is really different than that other show. But I did go back and watch the original Star Trek, and it's clear that they're two different takes, two different eras. So I never really compared them, and I simply looked at the Next Generation as a standalone show.
And say, David, in terms of say, you were producing and things like that, was your like in your career, did you always see yourself as just being, say, a unit manager, a unit production manager, a supervising producer? When did you say to yourself, I wouldn't mind giving directing a go?
I went to USC Film School and always would say when I was in school and shortly thereafter, I want to be a producer director. And it was such a fantasy to me. And when I first started in the business, I was in production, and that's what I did for years. Um, and then when I got onto Star Trek, Rick had this thing called the DIT School, which was director in training, of which Jonathan Frakes was the first graduate. And it was where Rick allowed actors and people behind the scenes to attend DIT school, which meant they went into training to prove to Rick that they had the commitment to direct and that they did their homework. And if Rick felt that they had done a proper study and that they potentially had the chops to direct, he would give them a shot. And he gave a lot of us a shot. My shot, he when we were in dailies, I would comment a lot on directors because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. And he saw something in me that was perceptive about the process, enough so that he actually came to me and offered me and said, "Do you want to go to DIT school?" And I said, "Let me think about it." So I was petrified. And I went back into therapy for 9 months, basically having a baby, to psychologically and emotionally be prepared to potentially direct. And also, I did a lot of scene study, studied other directors on the set, studied scripts, went to editorial. I did I would do scene study where I'd get actors who we would audition, and I'd ask them to do scene study with me. And I would, as a gift, as a thank you to them, I would bring them into casting sessions to audition for parts. And Rick afterwards, when they would come in and see it, he'd say to me, "Is that one of your players, David?" He would call them David players because I would bring in these actors that I had done scene study with. So finally, after 9 months, I went to Rick. This was at the end of the fourth season, I believe, and I said, "Okay, Rick, if you want to give me a shot, I'm ready." And that was it. So it was a long process for me to finally get to the point of my career where I got to do something that I had always wanted to do,
Because
and
like the first episode,
had the confidence to do it.
because the first episode you directed was The Mind's Eye, which is a it's a kind of like a Manchurian Candidate kind of episode. Like, and you've got obviously lots of scenes with Geordie's visor and kind of view through that and all that. How did you feel stepping behind the camera and dealing with the likes of Patrick Stewart, LeVar Burton, all of them? And like actually, John Fleck, I believe, was in that episode who we interviewed for the podcast a couple of months ago. How did you find that? Was it intimidating, or did you just take it naturally?
Died and went to heaven. Uh, Not just on that episode, but every other episode after that. I didn't want to go home at night. I I could have kept going. I was the Energizer Bunny. Um, it was it was a gift from heaven. Rick gifted me something that changed my professional life. Um, you talk about John Fleck. I got to work with John on other episodes as well. He was a gift. The guy who played the Klingon, help me,
Oh
uh,
Lord. Um,
Lawrence Dobkin. Lawrence Dobkin directed the second episode of the original Star Trek. So here I am directing a guy who directed the original series, and I was pumping him for information. It was like, oh, here's another gift. I get to talk to a guy who directed the original series. That was so cool. But it was a learning experience for me. And Brent busted me one day. I had a tendency to do a lot of takes. And we were on the bridge one day, and Brent, I was doing a close-up or something of him, and I said, "Great, print one more." And he said, "Well, if you printed, David, why do you want to do one more?" And he said, "David, you just want to do another one because you just want to do another one." And I said, "Yeah, Brent, you're right." And this was in front of the whole crew and the cast. And I said, "Yeah, Brent, you're right. We're moving on." So he busted me, and justifiably so. Um, but as I said, it was a learning experience. At the end of the episode, shooting on the seventh day, it was getting late, very late, and I was supposed to do a piece of action that I wanted to do, where Patrick disarms this Klingon and whatever. And
yeah.
um, I went up to Patrick and I said, "Patrick, I'm dying here." And I said, "I have an idea to do this." And he said, "Yeah, that'll be okay, David." Well, we did that, and it to this day, I rue the day that I gave up. And I went home that night, and I was so depressed that I felt that I had let the episode down. And I swore to myself that if Rick ever gave me another chance to do an episode, I would never do that again, which was to compromise. And I don't think I ever did. And it affected my directing career. because I was so intransigent. But I felt that was my job.
Mm.
My job was to deliver the episode. And if I compromised in a way that I felt was sacrificial to the episode, I wasn't doing my job. So again, it was a tremendous learning experience. Also, I did this scene. You want me to go on about this?
Yes, 100%. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
There was a scene where LeVar is in a turbo lift.
Yeah.
And I shot the episode with a lot of wide angles because I wanted to get inside his head.
Yeah.
So I did this shot with a extremely wide angle lens, which I boomed down into his face, and it distorted his face and made him look weird and wild. And I said to myself, okay, that's really cool, but I think Rick is going to have a problem with it. So I thought I shot it with a really wide lens, not a really, really wide lens, and boomed into him, and I printed both. And of course, Rick picked the less wide lens.
Yeah.
And again, another learning experience. Don't give them the choice. If
Yeah.
you shoot it, they'll use it. So from that time on, I never gave alternates. I stuck by guns. If I did what I thought was right, if they didn't like it, they could reshoot it. But they paid me to do what I thought was proper. So that's what I did.
So, David, are you saying then at the end of The Mind's Eye, when Patrick Stewart disarms LeVar Burton, are you saying that is
Well,
not
he actually, yeah,
what...
go ahead. I'm sorry, but yes, I heard that. Go ahead.
So, are you saying that's not what, like, when you look at that, you're there going, that's not how I wanted it to kind of end. I could have done
Yeah.
it better, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't even remember what it was, but when you look at it, it's pretty. It's not very good. I think I wanted him to tackle the guy and that they would go down and that then Patrick would grab the phaser out of him. And thinking about it now, I cringe. I wish you hadn't even brought it up more.
So sorry.
So, but yeah, and yet I'm proud of it. I look at the episode again, and I'm pretty proud of it. And you talk about the Manchurian Candidate. I actually did an homage shot that only I would know, and it's when LeVar shoots Colomini and
Yeah.
he falls back over in the chair. That's a shot from Manchurian Candidate. John Frankenheimer, the original Manchurian Candidate, not the remake. John Frankenheimer is a huge influence on me, and I actually got to meet him once. They did a retrospective of Manchurian Candidate at the Directors Guild, and he had his biography there, and he signed it for me, and I still have it. But I got to meet him, which was very cool.
David, if it means anything, I actually never had an issue with the end of The Mind's Eye. I actually think that the way Picard disarms the person at the end is actually perfect in the episode. So don't worry, I never had any issue with it at all myself. Just to make you feel a bit better about that. David,
that's your opinion. that doesn't help me.
Joe, what are you talking
go
about?
ahead.
It's such a terrible ending. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And David, do you think that the fact that like you'd been a unit production manager and that you'd been a supervising producer, so you'd been a lot behind the scenes in terms of what you'd done, do you think that helped then taking on the role of director, that you'd kind of seen everything from one side, you were going to the other, so you weren't being unfair on any side because you understood how the process worked from, say, beneath the line, I think, as you said, to above the line. So everyone would look at you going, this is Dave. Dave knows exactly what's going on because he's worked these roles, so he's not going to be unfair to anyone. Do you think there was a kind of perception of that when you went behind the camera?
I don't know if it was their perception, but it's a great question because when I was directing, I knew more about what was going on than anybody else. So if the line producer or the production manager started getting on my case, I knew where I was in the day. So if I took half the day to do one or two shots, I knew in the afternoon I was going to be able to pick it up. So because of my training and background in production, I knew where I was. And it didn't give succor to the production staff, but it gave me the confidence to realize that I wasn't going to go down in flames. So, good question.
And David, you've worked across, say, the four Trek series at the time, TNG, DSI, Voyager, Enterprise. In what way, when you were directing your episodes, now maybe not as much the Next Gen because you only directed two of them, but in what way did you were the series to feel different? In what way did you approach, say, the four series differently when you were directing them?
Um, you read the script, and in episodic television, I mean, I did two-parters, three-parters, that kind of stuff, but your template is the script. So you read it and you figure out what's the through line, what's the premise, what is this about, and what is the emotional content of this, and what journey can I take the audience on visually to complement, enforce, and expand upon what the script is. So it didn't matter what the show was. My obligation was to that story and that individual piece of material. So I never looked at the shows differently. It all grew out of the script.
And were there
And
certain...
that had to do with shows outside of the shows I did outside of Star Trek as well. It was it's all in the beginning was the word, and in television, writers are supreme. They're the executive producers on shows. They're the showrunners, and I recognize that. I'm not one of these directors who think, I'm the great creator. Episodic directors are not feature film directors. They're different. We don't have a lot of tools.
Yeah.
We go to casting, but the producers make the final choice. We have very little input on the script other than to go to tone meetings and ask questions. The permanent cast is already cast. The set designs and everything about that, there's all these permanent sets already. The DP is already there, having established the look of the show. All of these physical elements and creative elements are already in place, and basically you come in as a guest for 7 or 8 days, and then you go away and somebody else comes in. But you do have, to me, as an episodic director, you only had one tool, and that was my character. Everybody in the script has a character, and the director has a character as well, and my character was the camera. And my job was to have my character express itself as emotionally as possible. But ultimately, that was my only real tool. Also, editorially, you have the director's cut. But again, after you're gone, the producers come in and they can recut you. And I was at a point sometimes where I didn't even watch my episodes on the air because I'd cringe at some of the changes that were made. Not that I'm any great great arbiter about what's good and bad, but my way was my way, and seeing it
Yeah.
not that way, it kind of hurt. So even editorially, we didn't have the power, but the camera was sacrosanct. That was my character.
So, David, just to pick up on a point you just made there, then, of the 62 episodes that you directed, is there any that you haven't watched since you wrapped production? That even now, looking back in the mirror, going, no, I know they made changes, I'm not watching it.
I think I'm pretty sure I've watched them all. There's a couple that I might go fast forward on. Um, there's a show called The Muse for Deep Space Nine that I can't sit through. It's just awful. But and there's a couple of there's other clunkers. That's probably my least favorite of all of them, and I couldn't sit through it because I cringe.
And is that because you were unhappy with the story, or is that because you're unhappy with all the cuts and edits that they made after?
I was unhappy with the script.
Oh, okay.
And I
So
was
it's literally
unhappy
from
with,
conception all the way through.
yeah.
Right.
It was a script of, it was the writer's ultimate conceit. It's about a writer writing about being a writer. Whoa, boring. Now, I did another show that wasn't so boring. There was a writer writing about a writer, and that was The Visitor, but that had an emotional core to it.
Yeah.
The Muse didn't have that. And I could never find my footing for the episode. And when I look at it, that fast forward, I see my visual choices as being awful. I couldn't find the hook to be involved in that episode. So
Mike,
I take full responsibility for how inane it is.
Mike, I think we've got a new feature for the podcast. We're going to get David Livingston to watch his least favorite of his own directed episodes of Star Trek, starting with The Muse, and we'll watch it at normal speed. Actually, we'll slow it down to 0.5
Half
speed, so
speed,
it actually
yeah.
lasts an hour and a half.
Yeah, so it's been nice being with you guys. I'll see you later. That's really unkind. But I'm being honest here, and now you're even making it worse.
So what
David,
happens
you know
then?
what? Look at episodic television. We were doing 26 episodes a year.
Yeah.
And you're not going to pick a winner every time. If
Yeah.
I did 6 episodes that I can look at over, that's 10% of the episodes I did.
Yep.
If I can be proud of those, that's good for me in terms of my career on Star Trek. Okay. And that's good for me. And yet in every episode, even the ones that I don't like, I've gone back and looked at a lot of them and said, well, at least this was a good scene. Or David, you did something interesting there. I always find something that I connected to. But a lot of times on the mediocre episodes, there just isn't something that drags me along emotionally and has me there. And that to me is
what do you do in a situation like that then? If you do get a script that you really think is, oh my God, this is terrible, is it just a case of tough luck? That's the episode you've got, get on with it? Or can you work with the writers to kind of fix any of the shortfalls?
You never can deal with the writers in episodic television.
Right.
You have to find, you always have to find the premise or the emotional through line for a script. If the script doesn't have that, you got to make one in your mind so that it will give you something to hang on to. All right. And by and large, I was always able to find that. And it's a pejorative to say that they were bad scripts. That's really unfair. Again, I don't think I had too many really, really bad scripts that the writers themselves would recognize as being mediocre. But sometimes it's hard to find that kernel that you can latch onto and say, okay, this is where I'm going visually, because everything that I did was based on visuals. I didn't direct actors. The permanent cast, what am I going to? I'm going to talk to them about their characters. They know so much more about it than I ever will. And the guest cast, if you cast properly, you don't have to say anything to them. All they have to do is what they did in the room when they came in and read. So what am I going to say to them? It's just do your thing. And I got more important fish to fry. Now, other directors may say, David, that's not doing your job. You got to get in there and direct the actors and talk about their motivations and stuff. I think for me in episodic, that's a crock. That was unnecessary. My job was to make pictures that stuck together and told the story.
So
the rest of it.
In terms of then say, was it a case then when the season would start, would it just be kind of a rote saying, okay, we've 26 episodes, here's the 26 directors, but you wouldn't, you'd just be assigned, you'd be told, David, you're directing episode 12. You wouldn't have a clue what episode 12 was until you were given the script, and then that is it. That's your episode. Is that how it kind of worked?
It's changed today, I think, but in episodic television at that time, it was the luck of the draw. You would get booked months possibly in advance for a particular time slot, a period of time. And at that point, nobody knew what the script was going to be. It ended up being the luck of the draw. On The Visitor, for example, I was not supposed to direct it. Rene Aubergenois was. But because Colm Meaney had an availability problem, they had to switch. And that's one episode where I think that the writers thought they were going to get Rene, and that they liked that because actors, director, certain feeling. And then when it fell into my lap, I've always wanted to ask Rick and Ira this. Were they a little bit worried about me doing The Visitor? Because I wasn't known for great sensitivity, and my thing was to just balls out and let's wreck something. And I think that I've always wondered if they questioned my sensitivity to whether or not I could pull off that episode. I think I'll ask Ira that someday. But when I read it, I was petrified. I didn't know what to do with it. And I finally realized the best thing to do on this episode, David, is to not do your normal nonsense. Just get out of the way and let the actors act. And that's what I did. So again, that's finding what you need to do as a director for an episode to, as physicians say, do no harm. And that's ultimately got my goal. Do no harm, but to try and take the audience on a ride.
Well, David, in fairness, The Visitor has always been exceptionally well received, and I always listen, like whenever I talk about if you're introducing anyone to Star Trek, there's only two episodes I'll ever say you can watch. One is City on the Edge of Forever, but the second is always The Visitor. So when I was trying to introduce my fiancée to Star Trek, I knew she would never watch it, but I showed her City on the Edge of Forever first, and she said, "Why do people like this Captain Kirk fella? Mr. Spock is so much more attractive than Captain Kirk." But I showed her The Visitor as well, and she turned to me at the end. She was there going, "Are you crying?" And I said, "Yes, I cry at the end of this episode every single time I watch it." So, David, whatever you did on The Visitor, you did it absolutely spot on, because it has lost none of its appeal. It is still as glorious as it was when you first made it.
It's the writing, and it's Tony Todd, and it's Avery, and it's Sirach, and it's Nana. It's one of those episodes where everybody knew what they had, and they rose. Not that you always don't rise to the occasion, but everybody could connect with it, and that's what ended up. That's what ended up happening. I'm very grateful ultimately to have gotten to be able to have done it, and it's not Star Trek. It has a science fiction premise around it and an envelope, but it's a story about familial love, about a son for his father, and about obsession. I'm a great Hitchcock fan. Psycho. What is it? The one with and sorry.
Rear Window?
No, with God, David, this is terrible. Huh?
I'm trying to think which.
No, Vertigo. I just Vertigo.
Oh, Vertigo.
About obsession. And I've always thought that The Visitor was a lot to me was a lot like Vertigo. And because here's somebody that is just can't move on because of this obsession. So between the familial love and the obsession, it just the writing just drags you along. And you talked about you crying. Rick Berman was not quick to hand out compliments. He played it very close to the vest, and he brought me into his office twice during my directing career to talk to me about episodes. And the first time was on The Visitor. And I was prepping another episode, and The Visitor had aired the night before, and he calls me into his office, and I'm going, "Oh God, what did I do now?" And he brings me to the office and he's very stern and he closes the door and he looks at me and he said, David, my wife and I watched The Visitor last night and you made my wife cry. So that was that was the Rick Berman way. That's his way of giving you a compliment.
David, wait a
And
second. I have to go back for a second. When you said Rick called you into the office and you were there going, "Oh Jesus, what have I done?" Would you be the type of person that if somebody kind of calls you in, your immediate reaction is, "I've done something wrong"? Like, was there kind of a sense of kind of imposter syndrome in you that you're there going, like, they'll figure it out at some point that like I don't know anything and they're going to fire me, or were you always supremely confident in what you did?
well, I wish my therapist were here because she could answer that question because that's exactly me. I always figure every time I go home at night, whatever job I was doing, I knew I was going to be fired. And unfortunately, it's my nature. I wish I wasn't that way, but that's me.
Oh, don't worry, David. I'm the exact same. I had my year-end review with my manager recently, and I was convinced I was out the door. Like, so don't worry. I'm on board with you there with the imposter syndrome and belief that I'm getting fired every 2 minutes.
Yep.
Well,
David,
it's interesting because other episodic directors I've talked to, I won't name the person, but he's a good friend of mine and one of the great directors in the pantheon of Star Trek directors. He said, David, I always worried that they were going to find out that I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
I'm
That
just
I don't
making it up
have
as
a
I go
clue.
along.
I'm making it up as well. I don't have a clue. But I think that's endemic to being a director because it is, you gotta satisfy a lot of chefs, and it's difficult, but you gotta have a tough skin, and you gotta say, okay, what's my job? You can't lose sight of what your job is, and just go do the job and try to put all your neuroses aside,
but
which I
David,
tried to.
in terms of right, you directed the most episodes of any Star Trek director, like 62. So like, what do you think kept bringing getting you back in the director's chair, and especially with regards how you yourself feel about the fact that you were going to get fired every time? But why do you think you came back? And in fairness, like looking through the list of your episodes here, there's some absolutely brilliant Star Trek here. So why do you think you kept getting brought back?
Um, I asked Rick that because it was him. I was not always in good graces with the cast, the studio, the writers, a lot of people, the production staff, the
You,
director of
but like David,
the
you're
director of
the
photography.
you're the nicest guy
No,
around. How could you be in a situation where people didn't like you?
It's all the extra takes.
I don't know how far I should get into this, but I am I'm a bulldog, and I wouldn't let go, and I wouldn't compromise, and I and people, you have to realize that these people were working for 40 weeks. Okay. Every day was 12 to 14, sometimes 16-hour days. Then they get this guy come in who for many years was a producer and then came back having had been a producer. So he had a certain sense of entitlement. And a lot of people didn't look fondly on my, not that I had a sense of entitlement, but that I exploited it. And I'll admit that I did. I might be in a production meeting as a producer and say to a director, you don't need 20 extras in that scene, you can do it with 10. When I became a director, the producer next to me would say, you get 10 extras, and I'd say I get 20. And I'd get 20. And that didn't go over well. So I don't know if Rick once brought me into his office and said, David, everybody hates you. He said, the producers hate you, the writers hate you, the act. He said, but I like you. And that's all that mattered.
Mm.
And Rick was being facetious. And I asked him about this about a year ago. I said, do you remember me telling you that? And he said, yes, I do. But David, you were our rock. And that meant the world to me. I wasn't the best director. I wasn't the favorite director. He never let me direct a pilot. I certainly was never considered for the features. I was an episodic director for him. And I never was able to rise out of that. But in that world, I was his rock. He knew that he could depend on me to deliver whatever the material was. And I am infinitely and forever grateful to him for that. One of my friends who directed some of the great episodes said to me, David, how do you get up for every episode? Because he was getting burned out on doing so many Star Treks, and he couldn't understand how my energy could be up there. And I said to him, I said, how can you not get pumped up to be able to have this gift of being able to direct this wacky science fiction show where you can tell all these different varied and disparate stories. You couldn't do that on a regular television show that had the same sets and everything every week and the same plots and through line. You got to do all kinds of stuff. So again, I use the word gift a lot, but that's what it was. When I would get the script in my hands of the episode I was going to direct, I was shaking with anticipation and thrilled to turn the page and discover what was to be. What could be better than that? It was the best job I ever had. What do you think, you guys? Have you guys had that kind of job where it's like, I can't wait to go to work?
Yes.
Yes.
It lasts about a week, and then after the first week, oh God, I've got to get up and go to work now.
For me, I work in that job at the moment, David. So I actually look forward to going into work at the moment. It took me 42 years to find the right job, but I finally found it.
Yeah,
so.
I got to do it for 10 years, and when we broke for lunch, I never ate with the crew or the cast. I would go back to my trailer because I was so hopped up. Sometimes I'd have to take a little bit of an anxiety pill because I was so pumped. I had to bring myself down so that I could come back to the set after lunch and not be a crazed person. They had to ban the use of Diet Coke, my Diet Coke, when I had it on the set because it would get me crazy. I'm revealing too much about me, but you asked the question, so I'll tell you. I don't care. This is 30, 35 years ago. Who gives a royal rat's ass?
David, this is exactly what we're here for. This is absolutely gold. This is wonderful stuff altogether. David, why do you think it was? Is it just a roll of the dice that you directed more episodes of Voyager than any other series? Was that just pure luck, or was it just Rick's kind of favoritism of you, or what do you think it was?
I don't know. Again, that's something I'd like to ask Rick. I preferred directing Deep Space Nine because of the character interaction. I always felt Voyager missed an opportunity by not having the Maquis have more of an argument with the Starfleet people, and the show was designed for that. And I thought you're going to have a lot of character conflict, but that never happened. Deep Space Nine had that conflict, and in fact, I don't know why I never got to direct more TNGs. It may have been the cast didn't want to work with me. I don't know. But Rick told me that Deep Space Nine was his baby because he created it, and he wanted me involved in that show to shepherd it through in terms of as a supervising producer, and then gave me a bunch of Deep Space Nine. As to why I didn't get to continue on Deep Space Nine, I don't know. I don't know if Ira had issues with me as a director. I don't know if that had an effect or not. So but again, this is all pure conjecture on my part as to why I ended up doing more Voyager shows. And Voyager went on after Deep Space Nine anyway, so at that point it was the only Star Trek show on the air or in production. So maybe that's one of the contributing factors as to why I did so many. But
what was
I'm shocked. I couldn't believe I did that many. That was more than a season. That's crazy.
How many was it? Yeah, 28. Yeah.
28, yeah.
Full season, full season 2 as well. David, what were the differences between the casts on the Next Gen DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise? Like, in what way were the cast different?
Well, first of all, the one place they weren't different was in terms of leadership. Patrick Stewart was always first on the set and made it clear that he wouldn't countenance any kind of unprofessional conduct or anything else. I mean, not that there was, but he was the consummate leader. Avery set the tone for the show, and his inscrutable nature was what Deep Space Nine was.
Yeah.
And everybody else fell into that genre and his quiet and insistent leadership. Kate Mulgrew, the same way. After Geneviève Bujold exited, people were worried, well, who are we going to get? The first day Kate stepped on the set, there was no question. Again, first one on the set, never went up, infinitely prepared. And then Scott, this wasn't Scott's first barbecue. He knew exactly what it was. He knew what leadership was. He came in and that was it. In terms of the different casts, they all had their unique and idiosyncrasies. But when I look on all four casts, they all blend together. Sometimes I get confused as to which show Neelix was on, or which one John Billingsley was on, or who played the doctor there. And because to me they were simply the real people that I knew, and they kind of all blended together. So I can't really differentiate the cast members.
In terms of, say, across the 4 series, I'm gonna ask you a really lousy question, David, because because it's our show. We can get to ask really awkward questions. You directed 2 episodes of DS9 or Next Generation. My apologies. With the other 3 series, because you directed more, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise, what was your favorite episode of each to direct? We can call you out the episodes if you need us to.
No, well. To actually direct Deep Space, and this has nothing to do with the script or anything else.
Yeah.
This is purely as a process of directing. My favorite DS9 had to be Crossover, which was the first going back into an alternate universe.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it fit into my visual style and imagination. It checked all my boxes and allowed me to do stuff that I couldn't normally do. I also loved episodes where our characters didn't get to played alternates of themselves or completely different characters, and that I was shooting in an environment that was not the normal environment for that show, where we changed the lighting and everything on the station. And to have Nana Visitor play the intendant, and to have Avery play a space pirate and all that, that was perfect for me. Everything was so heightened, and you could get away with everything. I got in trouble there was a shuttle at the beginning, and I shot up the actors' noses with these really wide angle lenses, and everybody was going, "What the hell has gone wrong with David?" And it set my thoughts in motion. I backed off a little bit from that, but I wanted to make a statement about we're going to go on a wild ride and you don't know where we're going, but
Yeah.
take a look at this and you'll get a little inkling. So Deep Space Nine, that was my favorite from directing. My favorite Voyager uh, was The Killing Game Part One. And again, it was a episode about our characters being trapped on the holodeck, where their minds have been controlled to think they were in uh, uh, World War II France, occupied France, and we're fighting the Nazis. So I got to do World War II, and we had these Hirogen Nazis and all this action. I got to shoot on the back lot at Universal on European Street, and Neelix getting shot, and Seven having to be pulling out her guns, and it was terrific. But my favorite part of that episode was I did 2 shots of Jerry Ryan as a torch singer, and one of my favorite shots ever was this pan off of a piano up to her, and she turns her head and you realize, oh, it's Jerry Ryan. And then the Steadicam moves around and shows this French cafe, and we go past Tuvok and up to Kate, who plays the restaurant, the owner of the restaurant, and it takes her over to it was a huge shot and I loved it. And then later on, Jerry reprises and does another song, and I did another oneer. I'm a big fan of oneers. So for all of those reasons, visually, I got to do all kinds of cool and interesting shots and exist in a world that was not Star Trek. It was World War II France.
Yep.
Shooting on the back lot of Universal. I mean, what could be more fun? My favorite Enterprise was an episode called Impulse, which was, again, it was not a Star Trek show. It was a zombie movie. And when I read the script, I said, okay, we're not going to do Star Trek. We're going to do a zombie. And everything about this has to be zombified. So I shot a zombie movie, and I am very proud of that episode visually. And Jolene Blaylock, in my mind, of all her performances, I thought it was the best, because she has to go through this whole arc of becoming crazed and becoming possessed by this deuterium or whatever it was called, that makes her crazy and insane. And at the end, we were short on the episode, and my episodes were always shot short because I would shoot very tight. And we had to add on this whole extra section, which was perfect for a horror movie because it gave you a couple of more jumps at the end. And I actually got to lay out the shots to Brannon about that sequence, and he bought my sequence. So I was proud of that. So visually, that's my favorite of that. What's that? That's them. That's all three.
That's them. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, I took a long time to say all that, but you asked.
No, that's
so
the whole
cut it up in
reason,
post. You can cut out whatever you want in post.
And David,
fix everything in post.
Which was your favorite cast to work with then across the four?
Deep Space Nine. Armin Shimmerman's a friend of mine, and I love doing Ferengi episodes. I enjoyed the cast because of the characters they got to play. I say I differentiated them, but I did relate to them as their characters as well. So I'd have to say them. I'm also proud of having had some influence on Avery becoming involved in the show. I don't know if you guys know that story.
Go first.
Michael Piller wanted to consider African Americans for the part of Cisco, and among the other casting ideas. And I had done, as a unit production manager, I had done a movie for Showtime, which was a version of Uncle Tom's Cabin, in which Avery Brooks played Uncle Tom. And his performance was so compelling and heartbreaking and intense. And you could see that there was something inside of this guy that was so deep that nobody was ever going to discover how deep it was.
Hmm.
So I said, wow. And I read the script and I said, this is Cisco. I mean, Avery, Cisco, that's the guy. So I went to Junie Lowry, who's the casting director, and I said, because I knew that they were looking for African Americans to consider, and I said, how about Avery Brooks? And she says, yeah, Avery's on the list somewhere, but he's in the Bahamas on vacation. And I said to her, well, so what? Are you saying he doesn't want to read a script on vacation that could mean 7 years of work and make him financially solvent for the rest of his life? And she looked at me and she said, okay, we'll send him a script. So they sent the script down there. Avery got the job.
Did he know that story? Did he know that you had told Junie to do that?
Well, I'll tell you the top. At the wrap, and again, Avery, of all of the people involved, and I told you that Rick was not really quick to give compliments or anything. Again, Avery is the most inscrutable person, not just actor I've ever met, anybody in life that I've ever met. There's no way to define him because there's so much to him. He did a Paul Robeson one-man show that to me still resonates, that I saw it on stage. It was so powerful. And his singing voice, by the way, is amazing. You thought you were watching Paul Robeson, who was a tragic figure and had became an expatriate because he was accused of being a communist, all kinds of horrible things that happened to him, but he still maintained his Paul Robesonness, and Avery captured it wonderfully. So at the wrap party, 7 years later, we're at the Sky Bar at the Modrian Hotel in Hollywood, very, very Hollywood. And he takes me aside and he says, David, I want to tell you something. I want to thank you for something. I said, okay, Avery, great. He said, thank you for Deep Space Nine, for whatever part you had in it. And I melted. I was a puddle. I was like Odo going back into his bucket. It was so profound for me to get a comment like that from Avery Brooks. If it could have been from somebody else who was like a friend or something that, and then I would have, okay, you're welcome. But to come from Avery, that meant so much. And I'm so grateful to him for having said that, and that I had some part in him being on the show. Because to me, he was the heart and soul of the show. And the only regret that I have is that the writers and all of us that were involved on the show didn't realize what we had initially with Avery, and that they didn't write to him, and that it took a long time to discover that if you were going to have a successful show, it was based upon making sure that you reflected the show through the eyes of this guy, and vice versa. And finally, they put the goatee and they shaved his head. That didn't need to happen in season 4. That should have happened at the end of the second episode in the first season. But at least they finally did that. So for all those reasons, I'm a huge fan of Avery. I'm a huge fan of Armin and all the rest of them. I had a real affinity for it because of the conflict. Show business is nothing unless you have conflict. And where's the drama otherwise? The Next Generation, everybody loved each other. Okay, great. So you had to deal with the conflict coming from the enemy of the weak, or when you got possessed. Like when I did Power Play, our cast was inhabited by these light creatures. Okay, that made it interesting for me. LeVar was tortured and was being mind controlled. Okay, that was interesting for me because he wasn't Geordi. So those kinds of episodes were intriguing for me. But the rest of the cast in The Next Generation, they all loved each other. Voyager, as I pointed out earlier, they were supposed to be in conflict, but they weren't. So again, it always had to come from the outside. And even on Enterprise, very, very little conflict in terms of the cast. So ultimately, the most dramatically satisfying cast was Deep Space Nine. What do you guys think? I mean, I want to ask you, which cast of characters was the most interesting for you? Show, what do you think?
Well, look, I'm predisposed to immediately say The Next Generation. David, you're totally right. There was no conflict there, but it's the show I grew up with, so it's...
And so many people of your generation say that, and I respect that. But you know what? A lot of people, because I get to do some of these podcasts, and a lot of people are tuning in to Deep Space Nine for the first time, and it's having an impact because they're getting it. Now, I didn't take to Ira's going off onto this whole battle thing and stuff, which is fine, and I'm all about episodic television of one and done, and you move on to the next story. But to me, it's the best series. Okay,
Mike.
Jody.
For me, I don't.
Did you finish, show? You were going to say.
I'm done. I was passing over to Mike for him to say.
You know what? I think for me, it's Voyager.
I mean, not Jody's. Mike, I wrote down your guys' names. Jody is another person that's on your podcast, right?
Yeah, Jody's another co-host.
Where is she?
We always only do 2 hosts because if we have 4 people on screen, it's too much. So
too many.
Stick to 3. Yeah.
Too many. So my apologies, Mike.
That's all right. No worries. I think for me, it's Voyager. I always resonate with Voyager more. Don't get me wrong. I love the cast of DS9. I do. But for me, the relationships that Seven and the Doctor had, the Doctor as a character, full stop. I always seem to resonate more with Voyager than I did with DS9, as much as I love DS9.
Well, I agree with you about the Doctor. Bob Picardo is a friend. And one of the best episodes I ever did on Voyager was the one where he writes his novel.
Yeah,
author, yeah.
Author, yeah. I know Bob's regret. Bob likes the show. He loves the episode. He just felt that it was too late in the series for him to have had those perceptions. He said that should have been a season 2 show. Yeah. But if you watch it not knowing the arc of the series as a standalone episode, I think it works in that regard. But he's probably my second or third favorite character of all of them. He was, and it's Bob Picardo. It's him.
I mean, David, for me, it's those.
He's that in real life.
Yeah, but for me, it's those story arcs. The fact he starts off in season 1 as a glorified light bulb, and by the end of season 7, he is, and I think bringing in the mobile emitter just pushed the character further. Because the fact he wasn't confined to 4 walls, there's something about the Doctor's character that, and some of my favorite episodes are like Message in a Bottle, which is a big Doctor episode, and things like that. So for me, it's
Yeah, I agree. Great character.
I have to ask you this, David, because obviously I'm Irish, so I have to ask it. What was Codamini like to work with?
Okay. I thought you were going to go down the Fairhaven questions.
No, Jesus, luckily enough. No.
I hope not. Oh God.
No, we don't talk about such things.
Yes, I forgot. David directed Spirit Folk. Oh no.
Oh, he did as well.
I directed. No, Alan Croker directed one of them. What did I do?
You did Spirit Folk.
That was the
sequel. Did Spirit Folk.
Yeah,
which was the second one.
Yeah, that. Yeah, I mean, it was.
David.
I don't know why everybody's so. Well, you're Irish, so you have every right to condemn it. But you are condemning it. Okay.
David, we had Brennan Braga give an official apology to the country of Ireland and to the government of Ireland because of those 2 episodes. So, if you want to give your apology because of Spirit Folk, I'm very.
I'm not going to apologize. I directed it. Look, I didn't write it.
I just directed it. So how
It
am I
was the
to blame?
script he was given. Come on.
Yeah. So come on, lighten up, you guys. But what were we just talking about?
Colin Meaney.
Oh,
What was he like
Column.
to work? Yeah.
Yeah. Column is Column. He I love Column. He's a wonderful actor. He has an insouciance about him. He didn't need to rehearse. He didn't need to learn his lines. He didn't need to do anything. He just came in and did his job. And then he'd go off and do a movie somewhere. He is, he's probably the most, I don't know, is he one of the most successful actors who have ever been on in the franchise? And he and Sid were partners in crime.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I
always got the sense. I always got the sense with Colin. Again, I didn't talk to the actors, but the actor that I would have to talk to the least of all would be Colin, because he just had it. It was so natural for him. Everything about him was just so genuine and so real. And I look back on some of the stuff that he did, and of all of the characters on Deep Space Nine and maybe across the series, he represented the everyman better than anybody. And the reason is because he is the everyman. He has inherently, that is who he is. And that's why casting is so important. You've got to cast to the part and then play to that part. And that's the gift that Colin had, because everything was so he was the most naturalistic actor that I worked with. Nothing was ever disingenuous about him. That's my take on him. How do you guys see him?
Well, like as an Irish person, he's legendary. Like, he was given a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Irish Film and TV Actors Awards on the weekend. Like, he's just. Have you ever seen him in the movie The Snapper, David?
Yeah.
Oh, of course,
yeah, the one where he has the
daughter who's got the baby
van with the yeah.
No, that's the van. You're thinking of the van. There's
well, I've seen the Snapper. What's the van one?
The van is where he has a chip van with a friend of his.
Right. That's not the Snapper. Okay.
No. So there's actually 3 he was in. The Commitments is one. Then there was The Snapper, which is one of the most famous Irish movies of all time.
Right.
And then you've got The Van. It was a thing called the Barrytown Trilogy. It was written by the same author. But if you haven't seen The Snapper, David, please find it.
No, I've seen The Snapper because I recognize the title. I'd have to see it again. I don't know if I ever saw The Commitments. Was that a musical thing? Or?
Yes, yeah.
Then I'm pretty sure again, I'm hoping I'm not telling a falsehood, but I think I've seen all 3. But The Snapper, if you're saying that's the primo one, then I need to go back and watch it and make sure I've seen it. And if not, then to enjoy it for the second time. So thank you.
Definitely do. And for everyone watching, for the love of God, find The Snapper. He's absolutely magnificent in it. David, just in terms of, say, some of the questions on Voyager, I wanted to ask you, like, as you said yourself, like, one of the drawbacks of the show was, like, at the end of episode 1, at the end of Caretaker, all the Maquis people are in Starfleet uniforms, and, like, we've almost immediately, like, removed all the conflict from the show and things like that. In terms of, say, how you approach it, because obviously I know that, with DS9, all the cast, there was conflict there with the characters and all the different kind of aliens you'd have. How did you kind of approach it then with Voyager? Because, as you said, the threat was going to be external. We didn't have any conflict within the team because they were all effectively Starfleet officers and things like that. Did you enjoy working on the show? I suppose would be a good question to start with.
Well, as I told you, I just enjoyed directing. There was I had some issues with some of the cast.
Kate and I had issues. My energy was a bit too much for her. And I did an episode where she had to play herself, talking
Deadlock.
to herself and stuff.
Yeah.
Deadlock, which to me is a really, really good episode.
Yeah.
But she had a problem technically understanding what was going on, and I got frustrated, and I tried to walk her through it, but I'm sure she always had ill feelings about the process and probably directed toward me. And there were other occasions where I would hold on to stuff a little bit too tight to her way of seeing things. So we had a bit of a fraught relationship, but it was, again, it's kind of like an Avery story. It was I think it was my last day of directing on the show, or at the end of this. I don't remember the circumstances, but it was very much towards the end. And she said, "David, can I talk to you in my dressing room for a second?" And I said, "Oh shit, now what?" Again, it's one of those things. So I go in there, and she said, "David, I know that you and I have had our battles. I don't know if that's the word she used, over the years, but she said the work was always good." And again, that meant everything to me. Here was a person that I didn't have the greatest relationship with, but she recognized the value of the work. So that was much better than her saying, "Gee, David, I loved working with you. We had such a good time." So what? That would be meaningless to me. But for her to say that she recognized the value of the work, because we're two professionals, and to have that, and she didn't need to say that. Why? No reason. So that I was grateful for that. But in terms of the conflict, what was I going to do? If it wasn't on the page, I couldn't create it. Robert Beltran had this powerful energy where he could get totally out of control. The only time I ever saw a McKee kind of thing was there was one episode. Oh, it was where Tuvok is having to train these McKee to be more Starfleety.
Learning curve. Yeah.
Learning curve. And Chakotay in the mess hall, whatever it was called, cold cocks one of the McKee for. He says, "If you don't want to do it the Starfleet way, we're going to do it the McKee way." And he busts him and knocks him onto the ground. That was great. I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more of that as Chakotay. I don't need to see Chakotay talking about his animal spirits. That's a bunch of crock. But show that anger. Look, he lost so much. He was a McKee. I dealt with the McKee on Deep Space Nine. They were troubled people.
Yep.
They weren't so troubled on Voyager, were they? They lost that trouble really early. Go ahead.
And David, were you just as a director on Voyager, or were you still acting in a role of producer at this point on Voyager as well?
I was a supervising producer the first season, including the pilot, and then I left after that. And I did, I don't know, 2 or 3 episodes that first season as a producer.
Was there any reason you left it as a producer, or was it just because, did you just want to leave as a producer, or did you just kind of feel that the show wasn't kind of what you were hoping it might be?
A lot of reasons, but I got bored. I couldn't see doing another pattern budget. And also, I had some issues, which I'm not going to get into here. But
of course, yeah.
But I left, and Rick was incredibly gracious to me. I talked about wrecking stuff. His comment to me when I told him I wanted to leave the show, he said, "You just want to go off and wreck something," and a lot of that was true. But he said, "I'm going to, even though you're leaving the show, I'm going to keep hiring you." And man, and he did. He didn't have to. He had plenty of directors to draw on, and now I was simply a flavor of the week and a freelance director. And he brought me back for so many more Deep Space Nines and subsequently on Enterprise. I directed more Enterprise than any other director, which I realized a couple of years ago. I didn't even realize that fact, and it was shocking to me because I was simply just one of the gang again. So I'm so grateful to Rick for doing that.
And in terms of, say, working on Voyager, then, like, obviously, as you said, you had your conflicts with Kate. Who were some of the, and obviously your friends with Bob Picardo, who were some of the other actors that you kind of had a really good affinity working with?
Well, with Bob, he also did a short for me, which was great. And he did a couple of shorts for me, so he was always very generous to me personally. In terms of the question is, who else did I have a good or a fraught relationship?
Good relationship with.
Good. I'm trying to think of. Let's go through the cast. We talked about Kate, Robert. I did a couple of episodes where he was with the Kazon and other weird creatures, and the really tall guys that ended up being shorter.
Oh, Jesus.
What are they called? The
Hirogen.
The Hirogen. Oh, good. You guys are good. The Hirogen. When I shot those aliens, they looked weird. So I put the camera up against their face with a really wide angle lens because you could do that. Well, when I did that with Robert, because I had to use the same lenses, otherwise it would look funny, his face got all distorted, and he never forgave me for that. So he was not pleased about that.
We'll jump back in talking about Garrett and Robbie as well, because you mentioned them as well. So tell us about Garrett and Robbie then, in terms of how you got on with them, David.
Well, subsequently, I've listened to their podcast, and they've been complimentary of me, but they've also not been so complimentary of me, and I get it. Robbie has subsequently felt that I would force him into staging situations that he didn't feel were organic, and that I was simply doing stuff for the camera. And Garrett felt that I would put him in certain situations that were very difficult for him as an actor. Now, I learned about all this subsequently, but if I think back on it, I can sense, maybe I'm making this up, but I can sense there might have been some tension there, that I was imposing my director's will on them as actors and on their character that they didn't feel was warranted or organic. I did a scene with Garrett. I did 3 episodes, I think, which are the weaker episodes of Voyager, because they didn't know how to write to Harry Kim, and they put him in these romantic situations that were ridiculous.
And they never promoted
but I did this,
him.
And
never
promoted
promoted him.
No, it was he was the most underserved member of the cast, other than Jennifer.
Yeah.
We can talk about Jennifer if you want, because I have a very strong opinion about her. Yeah. But I did this scene with Garrett where it started on Tim getting up from the conference room, taking us over to Garrett and Kate, where Kate was really pissed at Garrett, and they leave the conference room, go onto the bridge, and then go into the captain's ready room, and it's all one shot, and it goes on for minutes. And Garrett was freaked out by it. And in his podcast, he talks about how when I finally yelled print, he went back to his dressing room and cried, because he was so emotionally wrought and felt that he didn't give it. He felt he might have failed in some way. When I watched the scene, and it's magic, And I'm not going to say it's good that he went through this horrible experience, but because of the fraughtness, if that's a word, of what he was experiencing as Garrett, it fed into the tension of this scene. And the tension of the scene was profound in terms of the writing, but because he had to do it so many times and it was a oneer and that he couldn't go up, he put this extreme pressure on him, and it shows. It doesn't show in terms of him not delivering the scene. It shows in the intensity of it. And to me, it's magic. And I'm not proud that that's what he had to go through. But sometimes you have to go with your gut in terms of how you're going to stage a scene and how you're going to shoot it. And if it meant Robbie had to go over there instead of over there because of what I was trying to capture emotionally, or whether I had to make Garrett go through this horrible scene where he couldn't go up. And he felt terrible the one time when he did go up. He felt, oh, I've ruined everything. Now we got to do the whole thing over again. I was being honest to my character. So again, I guess what I'm trying to say is my relationship with the cast was always colored by the fact that I was really selfish for my character and not respective of their character. Is that a good answer?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And so that's those two. But Jennifer, I did an episode where she's possessed.
Warlord, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw something in this woman that I had never seen before, because Kess was this mild-mannered, Troy-like character, but she had something so deep in her and so frightening, literally frightening, that she performed on the stage in Warlord. And Warlord is not a popular episode, as I understand it from reading blogs and other podcasts and stuff. But her performance scared me. And she was concerned about what she was doing and stuff. And I could sense it from her. And I said, Jennifer, just keep doing what you're doing, because it is so powerful. And again, I don't know about the other episodes because I never watched all the other Voyager episodes, but that the power that she showed in that character, to me, could have been exploited by the writers as Kess, not as this possessed character that she played in Warlord, but as the character of Kess, because it made her so much richer and powerful and unexpected for the audience to see in this little tiny package this monumental persona. They lost an opportunity there. And unfortunately for her, later in her life, her issues took over her life. But you can understand how she ended up there because of that power that was inside her. And
how did you,
again,
like in the first 3 years she was there, David, how did you get on with her?
Fine. She was very quiet, and I tried to engage her in conversation. I remember we had a lunch at the beginning of the show, and I tried to talk to her, and she was so shy and demure, and she felt almost embarrassed that I was speaking to her. I'm sure it was a huge deal. I think initially she was overwhelmed by it. She was certainly the youngest member in the cast, and she hadn't done a lot, I don't think. I'm not sure of her background, but to be thrust into this world of Star Trek, that it had to be overwhelming to her, and her personality wasn't adaptive to the joie de vivre, or whatever the French term is, of this camaraderie of Star Trek and all the other stuff that went with it. So I think she was a bit of a fish out of water, and it was tough to talk to her because she was so shy.
And
I don't know, what have other people said about her? that you've talked to her? Have you gotten into
haven't.
that, or
This is the
what's your
very
guys'
first.
take on her?
This is the very first time we've ever spoken about Jennifer on
Yeah,
the show. I
yeah.
think at
I'd be
all. My
curious
goodness.
what other people have thought
Hmm.
about her. And yeah,
I think just with her situation, what she's gone through and things like that, we've never really brought it up because, it's a kind of it's a sad story, and we kind of tried to.
it's a very sad story. I would
Yeah.
have liked to have talked to her, but yeah, it's tough.
The last person on the list then is Ethan Phillips. David, what was he like to work with then?
I've heard some stories
Well,
about Ethan already.
well, Ethan is Neelix, and Neelix is Ethan.
Yep.
He's a ham, uh, and he's a cut up, um, but he has a great empathy about him as a person. He's also a connoisseur of the arts. I mean, he's kind of a Renaissance guy, as I understand it. But I've never had much conversation with him. I always liked working with him because he was so funny. He and Picardo cracked me up all the time. Um, so again, it was a pleasure to work with him, and again, he was the voice. The most interesting characters to me on all the shows were always the observers of the human behavior. Thank God we had that data. Without data, you wouldn't have had the next generation, because at least you had somebody reflecting on the human condition, but also wanted to be more human. Um, on Voyager, you had both, as you pointed out earlier, Picardo becoming more and more whatever sentient. I won't even say human, but
Yeah.
sentient, and you had Neelix as this outside observer on the human condition, and the Vulcan personality, and Jerry Ryan as a Borg who was trying to regain her humanity. Those were always the most interesting characters, because they were trying to reach something and become more of what they were, and that was all. And growth. If when you have a series that goes for 7 seasons, you want to see the journey that these characters are taking. I know Next Generation is your favorite, but who went on a journey?
Oh God, nobody at all. Like not even
I mean,
remotely.
Patrick lives the life of another with a family and stuff for the whole episode, and after that, it's never referenced again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, at the end of that episode, it's clear that Picard has been forever altered. So I never sensed that anybody on that show ever did that, but Data did, and certainly in the features and everything else, they took him on this wonderful journey. In Voyager, we had Picardo. I'm trying to think on Deep Space Nine who went on a journey. Well, they all went on it. Let's put it this way: everybody, Nog, not even a permanent player, went on a journey. Jake, they all went on these profound, personal, not just professional and personal journeys of discovery. Extraordinary. That's why I love it.
David, were you surprised were you surprised Voyager made it to 7 years?
No. Every show, to me, because I was involved in all 4, I never had any doubt that they would all go 7. I remember we were doing the pilot of Deep Space Nine, and Sid was basically falling asleep on the set. He was trashed. David Carson, he was personal friend.
We had Sid on the show, and he told us that he used to stay up at night playing Ultima Online, and that's why he'd be so tired on the set. He was playing video games all night.
Well, I'm glad you told me that, because he complained. He said, these hours, they're just killing me. And I said, Sid, Thank you for that, because next time I see him, I'm going to call him on that.
Tell him.
Because
Tell him.
he was saying, I can't do this. I said, Sid, look at me here. You better get used to this, because you're going to be here for 7 years. And he goes, what? It was like a shock, and yeah. And 7 years later, and then when we got to Voyager, same thing. Paramount knew what they had, and they were not going to let it get away. The only one they let get away, it's because of stupid UPN and because Enterprise didn't have its act in order.
Yeah.
Huh?
Theme song. It's all because of that damn
Oh my God, don't start on the theme song. When I heard that, I thought that they had lost their minds.
Yeah.
I mean, to go from Jerry Goldsmith and Dennis McCarthy and all of the Alexander Courage and get to this insipid reuse. It wasn't even a new song. And what's her name is a great songwriter. But my God, I would do these episodes where I'd have this end of this teaser, and it would be, and we go, oh my God, what could be the worst? That right away was the kneel of death. What were they thinking? I gotta tell you another story. My first day of shooting on the show was at Disney Ranch.
Right.
The producer, the supervising producer, comes up to me and she says, "Now, David, I got to talk to you." I say, "Okay." She and I didn't always get along, and fine, whatever. She says, "Now this Star Trek is going to be different. This is going to be a gentler character Star Trek. We're not going to have as many stunts and action. This is going to be different, softer, whatever." I don't remember the adjectives. And I looked at her and thought, again, are you out of your friggin' mind? Look what you're competing with. Yeah. Look at anything else. You're telling me that you're going to present pablum to the audience and expect them to watch. And at that moment, I said to myself, this is the first show that I'm not sure is going to go 7 years. And unfortunately, it only went 4. Yeah. And you don't know the hurt for me that was, because I assumed that Rick would have let me keep directing. So that cost me 3 years of work. And I'm bitter. I got to tell you, I'm bitter about it, because it was an injustice to the cast, to the production staff, to the actors, and even to the writers. That show was underserved. It should have never been. UPN has sucked. It was a stupid thing that you never knew when the show was going to air. And Brandon and Rick are at fault too. They wrote some really good stuff, but also, I don't know. There's something wrong with the show fundamentally. I don't know if it should have been that show. I would have much rather have seen Starfleet Academy. I would have loved to have seen young people, starry-eyed, getting in and trying to figure it out, and failing and learning and going on that journey. Take them through the process of what it's like to become a Starfleet officer and go off and explore the galaxy. That to me would have been interesting. To me, it was just another ship show. And that was a strike against it. And then that stupid song, and right? Am I not right?
Oh,
no,
you're 100%
totally right.
right.
100% right.
Yeah, and it's too bad, because I did some good show. I got to do a Borg show. How do you do a Borg show on a show that is a precursor to the Borg? I mean, that, right? Regeneration. So,
David, looking back over the years and everything that you've done with your 62 episodes and working as a producer and unit production manager, what do you think your legacy to Star Trek is? Now, I get it. I know full well your therapist is going to have a field day with this when you tell them that we asked you this question, and you're going, good God, how dare these people ask me this? I can't talk positively about myself in this situation.
But I will.
Good.
My directing career basically ended after Star Trek because my reputation was not stellar in the industry because of how I conducted myself or on the set, not because of the work. And I beat my head against the wall for a couple of years about it, and then realized, hey, look, it's not that I'm giving up, but I have to face reality. So I changed professions. And it took me a long time to go back to the shows. And my wife helped me in that because people were asking me to appear on podcasts and go to conventions and stuff. And I said, okay, I'm gonna do that because there's interest in the shows. And I went back and rewatched a lot of this stuff, and I said to myself, "You're a good director. You did a good job on these things. You didn't give up. You gave your everything to these, and people recognize that. You guys don't have no clue as to how gratifying it is. How gratifying it is to sit here with you two guys who you're in the business of presenting this series and the people who are involved in it and asking us about stuff that happened 35 years ago. What other show has resonated? Now, it's a demi world, but what an incredible world. I went to the convention last August. I'm walking down the hallway and people say hi to me. They recognize me from whatever on these podcasts, or I walk by this guy a kid in a wheelchair. He's probably early 20s, and he's like this, he's never been out of the wheelchair except to get bathed or whatever.
Yep.
And my heart just breaks going by him. And he calls out to me, and I won't use his voice, but it was not real clear. But he says, "Are you David Livingston?" And I go, "What?" And I go back over to him, and I said, "Hi, yeah, I'm David." And he says, "I love your episodes." Oh my God! It's like, fuck. He is the most intelligent person I'd met at the convention. And he starts talking to me about this. And intellectually, he is so spot on. And he's obviously got exquisite taste because he tells me how much he loves my episodes. and he knows my name and he knows what I look like. And I look over at his mother, who is his caretaker, obviously, and she is just glowing with pride and looking at her son with such exquisite love and devotion. And what the two of them had to go through, because I'm sure they didn't live in Las Vegas, to get him to an airport, to get onto a plane, to come to this convention, to go down the long hallway at this hotel.
Oh, it was a long hallway.
It's a long hallway. Okay, yep. What's the name of the hotel?
The Rio.
The Rio, which is I won't comment on the Rio, but
it's better now.
Yeah, it's better. Some of the rooms are better. Yes. No, I grant you that. Our room was a lot better than it has been in the past. So yes, true. I'm not going to pick on the Rio, but for what they had to do to go there, because he wanted to experience and participate in the joy that he feels for Star Trek. So to have spent 10 years of my life directing the number of episodes I directed is the greatest gift, again, that I could have been given. And I can't think that if my directing career had continued, because I never saw myself as ever rising above an episodic director's level. If it ever did, because I directed some other episodes of stuff, they were never like Star Trek because I had such an affinity for the material. And again, I could do myriad kinds of episodes. I just felt connected to it. And I felt connected to Rick. I felt connected to the writers. I spent a lot of my life there. I spent 17 years working on that show. So for all of those reasons, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be here with you guys. This is way too TMI, you guys. TMI.
David, get out of it.
You know what?
You're enjoying this whole thing.
Well, yeah, of course I'm, because I can talk about this now because there's no consequences. You know, what if somebody can say, "Well, I didn't like what you said on that podcast." Do I care? Then you can say something about me if you want. Look, and there's a new generation every time. There's a lot younger podcasters than you are on, I'll tell you. There's these podcasters
no way.
Huh? Oh yeah, there's these podcasters in Australia. They're like in their 20s and stuff. I mean, yeah, but you guys are great. What do you have back there? You got Shenandoah, Discovery, Defiant, Voyager. Wow, those are cool. My name is on Voyager.
If I push up.
Oh wow. Cool.
Every badge. Well, nearly every badge. I have enough badges to make another frame. I've got to find wall space.
That is so cool. You guys are great, man. This is so cool. Yeah. You're more than fans because this is what you do. You do podcasts and stuff. I don't know what your other professions are or whatever, but
Mike's a graphic designer and I'm a learning and development manager.
Oh, wow. Those are both very cool. Mike, what do you think of Michael Okuda?
Fun story. I was in Vegas in August. And I'm relatively good friends with Dave Blass, production designer of Star Trek Picard. Cool. And I'm chatting away with him at his stand, and he gets a text through on his phone. He says, "Follow me." I go, "Okay, I'm going to follow you." And we go walking all through the corridors, and then all of a sudden we go into the second stage, and then he puts his head up and he's over there, and we storm over there, and there's Mike and Denise. And then Dave introduces me to Mike and Denise, which for me is an incredible experience because my other hobby is I create LCAS artwork.
Now, explain that to me.
So that's the computer interface from Star Trek.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I know that. I recognize the term.
Wallpapers for computers and phones and everything else in between. And that's my other hobby. Is I create that. So for me to get the chance to spend 10 minutes with Mike and Denise chatting away, get to show them what I've done, was an incredible experience. And I've got a great photo of the three of us in the halls of the Rio.
David, if you check out lcarsworkshop.com, Mike, that's the website, isn't it? So lcarsworkshop.com. Have a look at that after this.
LCARS Workshop.
Thank you. Michael and Denise are very close friends of my wife and I. We recently went to their 30th or 40th, whatever, wedding anniversary.
Yep.
Yeah, and they come to our 4th of July party each year, and they got a new dog.
They have the dog. April's lovely. We love April.
Yeah. We haven't met April in person, but we want Lulu to meet them. We talked about having a play date. But you met April, huh?
I haven't met April, no. But
just seen them.
I follow. Obviously, they post a lot of April content on Facebook.
They do indeed, as they have with their other dogs. Michael, they're both extraordinarily talented.
And Michael, the Next Generation, the bridge was the most boring set ever created, right? It was a living room.
I don't know.
Oh, come on. The only good thing about it was the horseshoe. The rest of it was boring. And Gene he said, we don't need tech. It's all hidden. It's all, we're evolved past all that. And Michael was handcuffed, and Michael was so insidiously cool about, and I always encouraged him, because I had to approve his budget for doing stuff. And as the series progressed all the way into Enterprise and then working on Picard and all the other shows, he kept putting we called them blinkies originally, and then they became computer graphics. And you look on Enterprise and you can point the camera anywhere and the background is going to be just throwing information at you. And that's all Michael. Michael, he went against the dictum and finally was able to move past Gene's vision of the future and create the Michael Okuda vision of what tech was. So he and Denise are they're extraordinary people.
I was watching one of the panels they did with Ron Moore in Vegas, which was for All Mankind, and how they were saying that they have the entire electrical schematic of Space Shuttle. And because obviously they're scientific advisors for All Mankind, which is set, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s space program. And they have the entire schematics and all the processes, and they have them nailed. So they know when they go onto set exactly what every button should do. And
that's them.
Who else does that other than Mike and Denise?
And guess who has actually designed patches for NASA?
Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and he goes to the launches, and he's been to the control center. I mean, he's ingrained in that world. And they've written at least 2 books that I know of about the history of Star Trek. And I'm a huge fan. We had the most incredible group of artists that you could possibly ask for.
Them, Doug, Johnny, Jeffrey Mandel, that's the one I was thinking of.
Look at we had Rob Legato, multiple Academy Award winner. Dan Curry, who has won more Emmys probably than anybody doing visual effects. And Gary Hutzel, who's unfortunately deceased, he was brilliant. I did an episode called The Dias Cast, which is one of my favorite Deep Space Nines. He does a space battle at the end of the episode, which you hadn't seen before on any of the shows. I don't know where he got the money to do it, but it was brilliant, and everything was moving around, and I never watched the shows, as I told you, on the air. And years later, I watched the Dias Cast, and I saw this because I really wasn't interested in the visual effects. I didn't have anything to do with them. Who cares? They're just another space battle. Well, I saw that and I went, whoa, that's really good. So yes, all these artists. Michael Westmore. I hired Michael Westmore.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
He was in Vegas briefly.
Yes, yeah. He and Marilyn, his wife. Michael, we were looking for a makeup artist, and I would check around town talking to all these people, and invariably I would say, well, who would you get to do your prosthetic work? And bar none, they would say Mike Westmore. So I said, well, maybe I should call Mike Westmore. And I knew his background, and he's Academy Award winning makeup artist. He's not going to want to do series television. Come on, a cheesy sci-fi show? No way. But I called him. We've had an arguments over the year whether I called him or he called me. The last time we talked about this, and they're doing a documentary on Michael, he admitted that I called him first, where in the past he said, well, it doesn't matter.
One called the other. There we go.
Yeah. He did the show. And I found out years later why he did the show. He was sick and tired of being out of town. He wanted to see his kids grow up. He wanted to be home with Marilyn. He didn't want to be on the road. He wanted job stability. And it had nothing to do with the creativity or anything else involved. He just didn't want to go on distant location anymore. So he took the job.
That's the best excuse.
But but his creativity, that is what is so amazing. And to come up with all of those makeups, I don't know if you know, but in his lab, he had all these books of creatures, salamanders, and all these weird characters that he would pull out to get inspiration for the different makeups that he made. Of my contributions to the show, Michael Westmore, yes. Avery Brooks, yes. Marvin Rush, I hired Marvin.
Hmm.
Marvin and I had a very difficult relationship. Love, hate. More hate sometimes than love. But, and then Jonathan West. They were recommended to me, or I saw their reels. David Carson. I saw David Carson's reel and I took it to Rick and I said, this guy's interesting. What was interesting about David Carson, he had an English accent, and that's what did it for me. I figured, well, we got Patrick Stewart. Why don't we have an English director? So not direct. Yeah, I had involvement in the choice of, or in the process of picking a lot of these people. Bob Blackman,
To the costume
which is
design. Yeah.
yeah, costume designer. Dorinda Rice Woods, who took over after Bill Tice. She took the show for a couple of years, but it became overwhelming for her because of what she had to come up with every 7 or 8 days. And then Bob came on, and he's just unbelievable. So
It's funny,
what a community of artists.
it's funny what you said, David, in terms of say who we interview and things like that. When we started doing these interviews, jeepers, 3 years ago now, it was all about. We said we're not just going to aim for the obvious people. We said because Star Trek isn't just about the actors; it is about the writers, directors, producers, composers, you name it. So I kind of said, like, I don't want to be leaving anyone off the list. Like, I want to talk to everyone who had created. So, like, a lot of the early guests, like, we had Eric Stillwell on, we'd Ron B. Moore on, we actually had Mike Westmore on, and all that kind of thing. It's just because we were
Good,
there going, like, it isn't just about one person. It's so many people, and it's so important to tell their story and have it kind of down. A friend of mine said it recently. He said, "You're actually creating like an archive of Star Trek voices in your interviews." And I said, "Sean, that's actually the best fucking way to put it." Because that's what we do. Like we look for people whose contributions are huge, but maybe people don't realize how much they've actually contributed to the world of Star Trek. And one of the most important things with what we do, it's all about positivity. We don't embrace any negativity. There's enough of that. So what we always do is we tell the positive side of all the stories, and we have people on to tell those stories. And it's been remarkable how many people have been so forthcoming with their time and desire to kind of talk and kind of come on the show and things like that. Like I only looked at it, what was it, about last week? I was going through my emails. I guess the last 4 emails in my inbox were all Star Trek people, and I was there going, "This is ridiculous. Why can I just email these people who've worked on Star Trek and have them email me and know who I am? I
Yep.
know that they can deal with me in the way that, say, Jay Chataway and Dennis McCarthy. I can just email them normally, and they're the nicest people in the whole wide world. Like I emailed Dennis when Generations hit 30, and he said, "Oh, thanks very much for emailing. I didn't even realize it was his birthday," and things like that. And like to have kind of gotten that far, but because of the connection we build through our questions, through our interviews, because we're here to genuinely care about what people's stories actually are and what contributions they've made. Same with you, David, like bringing you back on the show because I didn't get a chance to chat to you when you were on, and I've been so thrilled with listening to your stories and all the things that you've done, everything that you've contributed to Star Trek. It's been marvelous having you on, and as you said, there's nothing else like Star Trek out there. Like we're talking people whose contributions go back 35 years, and it still feels as fresh today as it did back then to us, anyway, as fans.
Yeah.
Brilliantly said. Um, I mean, we've been doing this a long time. I could talk forever because I love talking about myself to begin with. What other television? You tell me what other television show in history has had this kind of impact. There's the Star Wars world, and certainly that is overwhelming, right, as a franchise. But Star Trek, and the fact that it's the Energizer Bunny, it just the Star Trek shows that are on now. I mean, Star Wars. I don't watch them, but and I guess the latest Star Trek feature is not that good. Have you seen it?
So we had an interesting time with Section 31. So
Section 31, yeah.
we got the screener before Christmas. Then I was at the premiere in London, and we've just finished our wrap of interviews for it. So we had Rob Kaczynski on this last week, who's an incredible Star Trek fan as well. So for him, it was a dream come true to work on, be a massive Star Trek fan, and then also get to be in it. I think that it's one of those films where, if you take it, it has two problems. The first problem is there was so little information about it, and no one was correcting anything. So everyone's imaginations ran wild about what they thought the movie was going to be. So it was put up on this massive pedestal, and then of course when it dropped, it was completely different to what everyone expected it to be. That was the first problem. And then the second problem was it was originally going to be a 10-episode season 1 of a TV show that then got condensed down into a 95-minute movie, and there just wasn't the budget to actually make it what it should have been.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for the context, which means that I will watch it with an opened and
I think if
mind.
you pretend it's not a Star Trek movie, it's actually quite a good film. The moment you put it in the Star Trek universe, it then becomes a pretty bad film.
Actually,
Yeah,
I look at it.
I'm actually conscious that actually, Mike, there's one last question we have to actually ask David as our wrap up for the interview.
That's very true.
We've got everything done, and like so much of what we've been saying for the last half hour isn't going to be in the episode. But David, we've one last question for you.
I'll keep most of it in. We'll just delete bits.
Yeah.
We'll just delete bits.
Editing is about cutting out all the bad bits. That's what editing is.
I'm only going to cut out the bits about Jerry.
Okay.
The rest of it's staying in.
Okay.
So, David Livingston, what does Star Trek mean to you?
It means the opportunity to have had a directing career that I could have never imagined when I was back in film school. And I can talk about Gene's vision. I can talk about the emotional impact on the audience of the episodes that I directed, how people have responded at conventions and on these podcasts. But ultimately, it's a selfish answer that I got to do something that was so much fun. I was a kid in a candy store, and I couldn't have asked for a better run.
That's brilliant. David, thank you so much for coming on. This has been incredible. So for everyone watching and listening at home, remember you can catch up with more of us at our website and at our Patreon, patreon.com/Clonestar. But until next time, live long and prosper.